There was a time, not all that long ago, when Premier League shirt sponsors appeared to be quite wholesome. A time when Wolverhampton Wanderers were sponsored by Doritos, Leeds United were sponsored by Strongbow, and Newcastle United were sponsored by Northern Rock. Good old-fashioned, salt-of-the-earth failed banks, genetically modified corn dripping in saturated fats, and booze companies. Alright, so maybe the world of Premier League shirt sponsorship has never been squeaky clean, but at least you knew what Doritos, Strongbow, and Northern Rock did, and what they were selling. You might be slightly less familiar with W88, who are Crystal Palace's shirt sponsors this season, and the services that they provide. W88 aren't new arrivals on the English football scene, far from it in fact. Before sponsoring Crystal Palace, they sponsored Aston Villa, and before Villa, it was Wolverhampton Wanderers. Between them, these deals have been worth tens of millions of pounds. And if you're thinking, well, that was a waste of money because I've barely noticed them and still couldn't tell you what they do, well, that's alright, you see, because those adverts weren't aimed at you. Assuming that you are watching this video in England, the UK in general, Europe, America, and, well, pretty much anywhere outside of Asia. These companies, of which W88 are one, but there are many, sponsor English football clubs almost solely in an attempt to get the eyeballs of viewers in China, a country that is about 5,000 miles away from Villa Park, Selhurst Park, and Molineux. It is a murky world of largely untraceable money which has flooded into the Premier League, and indeed the Championship, since 2016, from companies that even experts in the fields of marketing, gambling, and business in Asia know either very little or absolutely nothing about. So in today's video, I thought we'd take a look at just some of the 23 gambling companies that sponsor Premier League teams, what they do, where they're based, and why they consider it to be worthwhile to sponsor a football team in England for millions of pounds, whilst either not actually having any business interests in the UK, or having them purely for aesthetics. Gambling is illegal in China, and it has been since the Chinese Communist Party took control of the country in 1949 during China's Communist Revolution. Unlike in a lot of other countries where you have some fairly draconian rules around gambling that aren't all that strictly enforced, China takes the outlawing of gambling pretty seriously. Routine raids are carried out at premises believed to be hosting illegal gambling activity, and the sentences for those found to have broken the law tend to be severe. Even a fairly liberally dished out 10-year prison sentence doesn't deter a lot of people from trying though, so lucrative are the earning opportunities in China's illegal gambling industry. In July of this year, 46,575 people had already been prosecuted in China, not arrested but prosecuted, for operating or facilitating gambling activity, primarily illegal casinos. That came in light of a government report which claimed that illegal gambling, which is all gambling in China of course, had risen by almost 30% in the first half of 2021. Despite China's best attempts though, in a country with as close to an all-seeing state as you will find almost anywhere in the world, their attempts to create a gambling-free nation have repeatedly proven to be futile. For a start, China has 2 state-run lotteries which it claims aren't gambling. Then you have China's special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau where gambling is allowed and where wealthy citizens from mainland China routinely flock in order to have a flutter of some kind. The Hong Kong Jockey Club, which holds a monopoly over not just wages on horse racing but basically all sports in Hong Kong, is the single biggest taxpayer to the Hong Kong government, and races in Hong Kong generate about 10 times as much revenue as horse races anywhere else in the world. Meanwhile, Macau overtook Las Vegas in gambling revenues all the way back in 2007, and by just 2014, Macau's gambling industry was already 7 times larger than Las Vegas's. Yes, China's appetite for gambling seems to be insatiable, in a country of 1.4 billion people. But what about those who want to gamble on more than the lottery at a time when either it is not convenient or they simply cannot afford to travel to Hong Kong or Macau? Well, they, much like everyone else around the world, take to the internet and gamble online. The only difference being that when they do so, they're not only most likely making a pretty poor economic decision, they are also breaking federal law and running the risk of severe punishment. Of course, they cannot gamble on Chinese websites because any online bookie that was set up in China wouldn't last 5 minutes. Instead, in recent years, these customers have been served by foreign bookmakers, and particularly those based in the Philippines. When Rodrigo Duterte took office in the Philippines in June 2016, he pursued a policy of closer ties with China. It makes sense, right? China is the dominant economy in the region, will soon be the dominant economy in the world, and by some measures already is. As part of Duterte's plans, he opened up the Philippines to Chinese workers, relaxing visa requirements for Chinese citizens. Around 3 million Chinese people enter the Philippines over the next couple of years, though Duterte's government apparently failed to take note of how many stayed and got jobs. An estimated 100 to 150,000, though, are known to have stuck around and to have taken jobs in one very specific field. You guessed it, gambling. Also in 2016, at the same time that the Philippines opened up the floodgates to Chinese workers, they created something called the Philippine Offshore Gaming Operator, or POGO for short. The POGO is the Philippines regulator for gambling companies that are based in the Philippines but serve clients in markets outside of the Philippines. As far as Duterte's government is concerned, the practice is a win-win. They get to employ people in the Philippines who will themselves pay tax in the Philippines, and these companies will also pay tax in the Philippines. Meanwhile, all of the not-so-nice stuff about gambling, the addiction, bankruptcies, and mental health problems, that would all be outsourced to other countries. What's not to like? The conditions of retaining a POGO license are supposed to dictate that you restrict anyone in the Philippines, regardless of nationality, from gambling with you, along with any Filipino nationals who are living overseas, and anyone in any country where gambling is illegal. Of course, that would include China, but the fact that around 80% of the people working for POGOs are Chinese suggests that perhaps that condition isn't being perfectly observed by all of those involved. What Duterte hoped would be a win-win has actually ended up giving him a fair few headaches. China is unhappy that the Philippines is essentially facilitating gambling in China, leading to tensions between Manila and Beijing when closer ties with China is one of Duterte's primary goals. Meanwhile, POGOs have also caused significant unrest in the Philippines, where the vast numbers of Chinese workers are accused of causing spikes in criminality and prostitution, with only 17% of all POGO employees actually being Filipino nationals. PAGCOR, which is the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation, and I hope you're not getting too confused with all of these anagrams, had even suggested creating self-contained communities of Chinese gambling industry workers within the Philippines in order to prevent disruption to the local population and law enforcement. The Chinese embassy in Manila basically responded by saying, "Come on, I know we're not huge on human rights, but lads, that sounds a bit dodgy." To which presumably China's Uyghur population must have collectively sighed and thought to themselves, if only you took such a consistent line on labour camps, eh? You don't seem to be too fussed in Xinjiang. Anyway, in order for these businesses to be viable, they obviously have to attract Chinese customers, and that is easier said than done, regardless of the appetite for gambling in the country. Since gambling is banned in China, so too are any adverts for gambling, which means that making people aware of your existence as a company is perhaps the biggest hurdle that these companies face in attracting Chinese gamblers. The solution, a number of them have decided, and in case you had forgotten that this is a YouTube channel about football, is to sponsor football teams, and particularly Premier League teams. The Premier League is absolutely huge in China. China is the league's largest single audience with 300 million fans, which is about 5.5 times the entire population of England. So since 2016, a number of these companies have taken to sponsoring English football teams, from Championship strugglers all the way to Champions League winners, and very little effort has been made to disguise what they are doing. In some cases, these companies haven't even had functioning web addresses in the UK, just landing pages, saying something along the lines of, "coming soon." Take Aston Villa's sleeve sponsors, who appear on much of their online marketing, Ubao or HT Bet or OB Sport. Villa are a big club, European champions no less, with aspirations of returning to the big time under new boss Steven Gerrard. You would imagine that their sponsors are a pretty reputable outfit and a fairly big deal. You know, maybe I'll even place a wager with them. Oh, hang on. This is what their website looks like. Or their landing page, I should say, since that is all it is. Not to worry, what about Hth Bet? They are the official betting partner of both Leicester City and Manchester United. Their logo, accompanied by Chinese writing, can be seen on the advertising hoardings at Old Trafford. The theatre of dreams, ladies and gentlemen. Now, they must surely be the real deal. Okay, let's head over there now. Oh no, how annoying. It doesn't look as though they are up and running yet either. Coming our way soon, apparently. In fact, I don't know about you, but there seems to be a striking resemblance between those two websites to me. Hang on, let's just take a quick look again at the OB Bet and Hth Bet websites alongside one another. Yeah, they definitely look a bit similar and, you know, feature the exact same wording. That's a bit odd, isn't it? Well, actually, it's not. You see, if I scroll down a little bit further, you will see that both of these websites are going to be powered by TGP Europe, once they are up and running, you know, whenever that might be. TGP stands for The Gaming Platform, and TGP Europe is a company based in the Isle of Man, for obvious reasons, which holds a UK operator's licence from the Gambling Commission. Now, getting an operator's licence in the UK is notoriously time-consuming and difficult, with lots of red tape and hoops to jump through. So TGP offers these overseas firms a service whereby they don't actually have to do anything, they just stick their logo on a white label website which is run by them and huzzah, there you have it, you've kind of got a gambling business in the UK. Of course, the websites aren't very good, in my opinion I guess, and some of them aren't even up and running, but none of that really matters since the UK audience isn't what you're interested in. There are already lots of dominant players and early movers in the UK gambling industry. Wresting any business from them would be a timely and expensive process within an already fairly saturated market. Besides, even if you did succeed in doing that, you'd likely have to split your profits with TGP since that is normally how those partnerships work. If you check out the partners page of TGP Europe's website, you won't actually find OB Bet or Hth Bet listed on there, the latter of whom also sponsor Wolfsburg, Lille and AC Milan, and at one point appeared to be claiming to sponsor Euro 2020, though UEFA never included them among their own list of partners. But you will find the likes of SpotUp, who sponsor Leeds United and previously West Ham, 12 or 12 Bet, who have sponsored the likes of Sevilla, Wigan Athletic and Hull City, and Fun88, who sponsor Newcastle United's shirt, having previously sponsored Burnley's shirt, and who also have a long-term partnership with Tottenham Hotspur. I could go on. There are a lot of them, and it is not hard to tell that they are being run by the same people as white label firms. I mean, here is the Fun88 website, and here is the SpotUp website. Notice anything? This stuff is absolutely rife, and it doesn't just stop with Premier League football teams. I kid you not, whilst I was midway through writing this video, I received this only slightly redacted email from a company called Onexbet. I don't know why I'm acting surprised, because whilst the timing might seem bizarre, I receive these types of messages all the time. Onexbet are a particularly interesting case study though, since their history is shady even by bookmakers' standards. Believed to be owned by Russian millionaires exiled to Cyprus, Onexbet was founded in 2007 and is licensed in the small island of Curacao in the Caribbean Sea off the coast of Venezuela. That is all normal enough though, I suppose, but Onexbet gained huge notoriety in 2018 when they began sponsoring a string of major sports teams, events and competitions, including the likes of Chelsea, Liverpool and Tottenham. Oh, and Barcelona. Clearly, none of these teams had done much due diligence on Onexbet, or, like everyone else, just didn't care so long as the deal was worth enough cash, since it didn't take the Sunday Times much digging to produce an enormous expose on them in 2019. The newspaper exposed the fact that Onexbet operated semi-pornographic gambling rooms, allowed bets on children's sport, and streamed live cockfights. Cockfights there refers to the age-old blood sport involving cockerels. Just to be clear, the cockfights were not part of the semi-pornographic content. That aspect, in case you were interested, involved topless croupiers and dealers dealing cards or spinning roulette wheels in live casinos. Pogos have found that games that simulate a real-life casino experience, though not always necessarily topless, are among the most popular with Chinese consumers, and you have to gain a separate license with the Pogo in order to be able to operate them. Some of you may recall that over the summer, Norwich City announced a £5 million sponsorship deal with a company called BK8, only for the deal to be scrapped just 3 days later when people began discussing the fact that BK8's social media profiles were full of scantily clad, heavily sexualized women, and their YouTube channel featured the same women doing things like eating sausages and bananas in rather suggestive fashion. Apparently, Norwich City didn't want to be associated with that kind of thing. John Terry had no such complaints. When the revelations were made about Onexbet, the 3 Premier League teams that they sponsored all pulled out of those deals, but they were soon replaced with other similar arrangements. You might be wondering why any of this matters. It all seems quite far removed. A scandal involving China and the Philippines, where English football is only a pawn in these companies' games. And in many ways, that is exactly what it is. But, of course, in allowing these sponsorships, Premier League teams are the facilitators of that business model, and everything that comes with it. I'm sure many of you watching this video will know of someone, a friend or family member, who has suffered from a gambling addiction, or, at the very least, some other form of addiction. Well, Chinese people are no different. They are just as prone to addiction, just as prone to making decisions with horrible financial ramifications, and just as prone to having gambling ruin their lives. Securing the first deposit of a gambler in China is said to be valued at $500 by these foreign betting companies. That is not because most people will end up gambling around $500. It is because a significant enough number of people will develop a serious gambling addiction and will gamble huge amounts of money, thus dragging that average up and making new arrivals so valuable. These bookmakers want the addicts, the ruined lives. That is their jackpot. But whilst Chinese problem gamblers suffer from all of the same difficulties as problem gamblers in the US, the UK, and the rest of Europe, they benefit from none of the same charities or support networks that offer what little lifeline addicts in this country have, for example. Since gambling is illegal in China, there is no gambling commission, no gamble aware, no gamcare. A Chinese gambler is more likely to be arrested, since they have broken the law, if their problem gambling is discovered, than they are likely to receive any support. It is worth noting, by the way, that it is not just Asian betting firms with landing pages in the UK and names you've never heard of that are profiting from Chinese customers. Bet365, who are headquartered in Stoke and whose founder Peter Coates owns Stoke City and is a very affable man to talk to, is the largest bookmakers in the world. Customers staked a grand total of £64.49 billion with the company in 2018-19. But where was that money staked? A Guardian investigation in 2014 accused Bet365 of making a significant amount of its money from customers in China, finding that the company frequently changed its Chinese web address to make it harder for regulators to shut them down, that they had created a large call centre in Staffordshire staffed by Chinese-speaking workers, and that they had constructed a complex payment system that allows it to take bets placed using China's currency. Bet365 denied any wrongdoing, which is fine, but they refuse to disclose, to this day, the geography behind their revenue and profits in their annual accounts, claiming that, quote, a geographical analysis of turnover has not been given as In the group of the directors, such disclosure would be severely prejudicial to the interests of the group." End quote. Why would it? I can't see any good reason why it would. I'll let you come to your own conclusions. If you are wondering why the UK government and the Premier League have been so slow to act on this, well, the answer, as it quite often does, is likely to have a lot to do with money. A number of MPs have dragged their heels when it comes to any gambling regulations or inquiries because they are up to their eyeballs in freebies and cash, courtesy of bookmakers. Meanwhile, many Premier League teams claim that they need the cash that these deals provide, as it is a vital source of income for them to exist. But is it really? The Premier League just signed a new £2 billion TV deal with NBC to broadcast games in the United States, on top of the £5 billion UK deal that they agreed to earlier this year, and amongst many, many others. Whilst these sponsorship deals are not insignificant, sometimes worth as much as £10 million, that is a backup fallback in today's money for a lot of these teams. And if they weren't doing these deals, it's hardly like they would be getting nothing whatsoever. They might only get, say, £6 or £7 million from a more reputable company, and hey, who knows, maybe that would be better for your kits, that might make you a more attractive prospect to fans, more people might buy your shirt, and you might not be associated with semi-pornographic cockfighting scandals. The cockfights weren't semi-pornographic. That is, I'm conflating the two, but you get the idea. It all seems a little bit short-sighted to me, but then again, that tends to be how finances in football operate. Either way, it does seem likely that, at long last, the government and the Premier League are going to ban these types of deals in the imminent future. Reports suggest that ministers have finally decided that foreign betting firms probably shouldn't be able to sponsor Premier League teams, and there is a push for a more extensive gambling ban, perhaps even including UK firms as well, as awareness of the harm inflicted by the industry is better understood by a wider audience. So that is it for today's video, which was sponsored by Onexbet. No, not really. I shouldn't think that they would have enjoyed it, but I appreciate them thinking of me, just as I appreciate all of you watching today's video. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC7s. You can also find me on social media, on either Twitter or Instagram. I would recommend Twitter, but you know, whatever floats your boat, via the username @HITC7s on both, should you wish to do so.